Hello here, and welcome to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Steve Sipple, Sean Callahan here, trying to get you through the least productive work week in America.
Whoa, Sean.
It is. I mean, you're just completely thrown off because, Christmas Eve was Sunday. Monday, you have Christmas Day. And, the 26th is too, like, and you dealt with this in some of your other circles, like not a lot of motivation to get rolling on the 26th.
The 26th, no, the 26th was that yesterday?
Yeah, that was Tuesday.
Yeah, I actually, you're my boss, so I can say this. I actually sat down, and we'll talk about this stuff later on the show later. But I watched the entire Minnesota Bowling Green game, and the entire game. I never do that.
And
had time.
And I know there's a lot of critics of the bowl games, but what I like about the bowl games is there's usually just one on at a time. So you can kind of zone in on a game that you never would zone in on.
Oh, 100.
And you're like, God,
and
yeah. My daughters are watching the Minnesota game with me because they went to the game in Minneapolis this year. And, they kind of take an interest to follow the Big Ten. And so it's fun. And then Kansas was on. And we know Lance Leipold, Scott Fuchs, the O-line coach, the linebackers coach, Anatowo. He's married to one of my mom's, married to an Omaha guy.
Okay.
So there's a lot of connections to that Kansas staff to Nebraska. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting, and nothing else is on. So I quietly enjoy watching, and then obviously the NFL was great.
Oh yeah,
not being a Chiefs fan, it wasn't great.
Oh yeah, seeing the Chiefs go down was glorious, Sean.
You're one of those.
I'm kind of a hater on the Chiefs.
Because they've built their team the correct way. You got to hate on them.
No, because they got that whole Taylor Swift thing going. It's like, come on, Travis Jabroni and all that.
Is that do you call him Jabroni or
he's a Jabroni, Sean? The Travis Kelce. I was talking to my sister, who's a big Chiefs fan, Kathy. She's a big Chiefs fan. I was like, I don't like Kelce. And she looks at me and goes, is it because he's kind of a jabroni? I was like, I'm calling him Travis Jabroni from now on.
They're in trouble.
They are in trouble on offense.
The projection right now, too, for their opening playoff game, its projection is Buffalo. So
they've lost 3 of their last 4.
Their road to the Super Bowl this time around will be very difficult.
Your quarterback looks scared too, man. If I was that head coach or the offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy, I would get him aside and say, "Hey, project some confidence. Your face looks scared. You look scared. You look like you're about to cry sometimes." I don't know. I'm okay with Kelce. But I'm telling you, Sean, that whole Taylor Swift thing, I guarantee works against him. I guarantee you players are, other guys are like, all right, come on.
Just the spotlight and the extra attention that brings.
Yeah. I'm not the big fan of it like a lot of people are. I mean, I'm not. Listen, Taylor Swift's fine. I recognize she's an American
icon.
Yeah, she's incredible. And she's an incredible entertainer. It's just the whole kind of sideshow I wonder about sometimes, how that affects a team. It's a team game, Sean.
But how about football, just NFL, just saying, hey, we're going to take over Christmas.
Oh, and they took it over.
NBA, that was kind of their swan song, their parade. No, the NBA season doesn't start till Christmas. Well, it didn't start this Christmas.
No, it got overtaken. NFL's overtaken everything.
NFL drew 25 to 30 million viewers for every one of those games.
It is king in this country. Now, Mark Cuban 10 years ago said the NFL has to be careful, essentially not to oversaturate itself. 10 years ago, he said the NFL in 10 years will be in trouble because it pushes too hard. He's wrong.
Guess who's leaving the NBA?
Cuban. But he's wrong, but it's still something to ponder because now what nights do they play? What nights do they not play on now? Yeah. Wednesday?
When I was reading, the Wall Street Journal had a story about NFL on Christmas this year, and NFL will play every day of the week around Christmas as long as it's not a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Oh, Tuesday or Wednesday.
So,
okay. So they
will play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Okay, I didn't know that.
If it works out that way,
I didn't know they play Fridays.
They will. I mean, they would.
Okay.
To get a game on.
Okay.
I mean, like last year, there was like a Dolphins-Packers game on Christmas Day, if I remember right. So I think they're going to continue to do that as long as it's not Tuesday, Wednesday, which for whatever reason, they just want to stay away from. When you play on Sunday, it's kind of.
I got to explain myself a little bit on this Chiefs thing, Sean. I was a Raiders fan growing up, big time. So I have a natural sort of disdain for the Chiefs because of that. And I've sort of retained it into adulthood. Like, if you're a Raiders fan, how do you think you feel about the Chiefs? Don't like them, right?
How about Antonio Pierce? Guy was coaching at Long Beach Poly, goes to Arizona State to work under Herm Edwards. And obviously he was involved in that huge recruiting scandal during the pandemic where they were bringing in recruits.
They were in vans and working them out at city parks, John, city parks.
And gets out of that. And he's in the NFL, and now he's the head coach of the Raiders.
Well, he's the interim head coach.
He's going to get the job.
Oh, what if they want Harbaugh? What if Harbaugh's available?
Is that the job Harbaugh wants?
Maybe. Pierce, though, I get where you're going. I mean, I'd be fine with Antonio Pierce. He's 4-3 as the interim. 4-3. Okay, he's looked good, and they look good on defense. They didn't look good on offense on Christmas, but they look good on defense. But Sean, think about Harbaugh, the bad boy of college football, going to the Raiders. Kind of fits, doesn't it? Number 7 pick. Take J.J. McCarthy. How about Harbaugh and J.J. McCarthy leading the Raiders?
Aiden O'Connell looked fairly average in the second half, but
he didn't complete a pass for 3 quarters.
But he's managing.
He's all right.
The game. They can run it.
He's all right.
How about Amir Abdullah?
Yeah. All right.
Amir Abdullah.
I don't know how much he played on
Christmas. He came in and made some runs.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see that. Good for Amir. But anyway, yeah, Sean, what we're talking about here is an opportunity for us to watch other games because Nebraska's not playing. And Nebraska could have well been playing in Detroit.
I hope next year at this time we're scrambling to set up this show in some hotel lobby and God knows where.
Where?
Anywhere.
Well, it could have easily been Detroit for whatever bowl game.
I think it would have been Vegas. And here's why.
Okay.
Because they beat Northwestern head-to-head. So they would have kind of had that. Northwestern probably would have fallen down to that guaranteed rate bowl and played Kansas. Nebraska to Vegas on the 23rd would have been probably where they go.
To play Kansas.
No, to play Utah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Northwestern played Utah.
Yeah, and then I think Nebraska's head-to-head win over Northwestern would have bumped them over that. I mean, there's really the Bulls just kind of select on what they want, and Vegas is going to want Nebraska over Northwestern.
Bulls are all about
money
matchups.
How about like if you lived in El Paso, Texas, and you were like the sports columnist for what's the El Paso newspaper?
I don't know. The El Paso News. Oh, El Paso Times.
You got Notre Dame, Oregon State, coming in for a bowl.
Crazy.
Game.
That is crazy.
I mean, that's a great Sun Bowl.
It really is a great Sun Bowl. But back to Nebraska, you could have seen them playing in Detroit, though. But if they
would have jumped Minnesota at 6 wins.
You feel pretty good if you're Nebraska. Utah was without 2 starting safeties. I don't know what happened to them on offense, but they didn't have 100. Sean, Utah went into deep into the third quarter with under 100 yards of total offense. I know Northwestern's defense is good, but it's not that good. And Nebraska could have hung. What I'm telling you is Nebraska could have hung with Utah. Could Nebraska hang with Kansas? That's a whole nother question.
One of the real litmus tests will be how does Iowa do against Tennessee?
Litmus test.
Because I really think now that Joe Milton has opted out and
Tennessee quarterback,
Joe Milton. Sorry, you like to
just people don't always know, Sean.
Joe and Nico, the 5-star freshman. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's going to start as a true freshman against Iowa's defense. So yeah, and we're going to talk more about Big Ten bowl games later on, and we're going to do an extended mailbag because we never can even come close to getting through the mailbag. But Steve Sipple and I are going to do an extended mailbag, and you're wondering where's Robin Washut? He's off in Iowa. Abby's out of town, so we're holding down the holiday fort here. And I do want to bring up one thing too. Another tradition at Husker Online with Christmas has been prime rib. We've kind of started this thing over the years where I discovered this recipe over 10 years ago on how to make an easy, simple prime rib.
Okay, let me.
It's a reverse sear method.
I'm sorry.
And
a
reverse sear. So like you multiply your weight times 5 pounds and you cook it for 500 degrees times 5 pounds and you kill the heat, let it sit for 2 hours. That's what it looks like. And so we had a huge thread, like 10,000 views on our premium message board where everyone shared and discussed their prime. That was our leftover cuts.
That looks good
for sandwiches and whatnot. But we had
sandwiches and whatnot, and you just going through the kitchen.
No, those are the ribs. Like, I cut the ribs off.
So how about just grazing on that, Sean?
I did Fred Flintstone one of those ribs.
I bet you did. Why would I not?
You would?
Oh, 100, Sean. Yeah, I'd do it. I'd go through the kitchen multiple times.
I mean, those are. So yeah, we went to Leon's this year, local market, to get the prime rib, and turned out great.
Looks good. I mean, that looks incredibly good.
And I figured out a new method this year. Like I used to, you put butter all around it, kind of create a wall to get the sear.
Of butter.
Well, it cooks off, but what happened is the butter would burn off on the bottom of the pan, and then it would smoke up.
Oh boy!
So I kind of figured out a new method. I loaded the bottom of the pan up with vegetables, potatoes, carrots, onions, all that butter and meat juice that would usually smoke up my kitchen. Just cook the vegetables.
Ooh.
And it was just pure goodness.
So the vegetables tasted a little
garlicky, buttery.
Ooh.
Rosemary, thyme.
Sean, you kind of seem to know what you're doing in the kitchen.
That was the move of the meal. And that was
the move of the what?
The meal. Like it turned out like,
is that the move of Christmas?
My in-laws man the oven while we're at church, and we come back home and it's ready after we get home.
You trust your in-laws with that?
Oh, it's just turn the oven off. That's all you got to do. Let it sit. You don't open the oven door and boom.
Sean, I'm really impressed. I'm not joking around.
So that turned out, but again, I want to be on a bowl trip, and my wife has mentioned that to me. She's like,
she wants you to be on a bowl trip too.
They want to go.
Oh, I thought she wanted you out of the house.
Yeah. Taking the family to the bowl trip.
That'll be fun.
It's fun, but it's a lot more work. It's like running 2 jobs. It's like running 2 trips.
I'll try to manage myself so you don't have to manage me.
All right. Well,
wow, Sean, we haven't gone to a bowl for 7 years now.
I know. My daughter is 7 and she's never experienced a bowl game.
Good God. That's got to change. Nebraska got the quarterback situation settled. We'll see.
All right. That's enough morning zoo radio here.
That wasn't morning zoo. It was some focus.
But when we come back, there is some transfer portal things on the table for Nebraska. We're going to discuss that as Nebraska has a running back coming in, and they possibly might have a receiver coming in. We're going to hit on that next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, getting you through this Christmas week. And there is some Husker news of note to kind of keep tabs on because the transfer portal remains open. Husker players have roughly until the first week of January that they can still technically enter the portal.
January 2, Sean.
But the big news is there's a transfer portal window to bring visitors on from January 3rd through 7th. The regular dead period in recruiting ends after that a week later. But that 3rd through 7th, we already know that Oregon running back Dante Dowdell is going to come in to Nebraska on an official visit as Nebraska is, kicking the tires on Dowdell, who was a former top running back in the country, is going to leave Oregon after 1 year because the Ducks returned their top 2 running backs who rushed for almost 1,800 yards this past season, or more than 1,800 yards. So the opportunities in Eugene are limited. So Dowdell will be here. But the other one is they're in the market, as you know, Steve Sipple, for a wide receiver. Jamal Banks confirmed to me on Christmas night that he is talking to Nebraska about getting the visit set up to come in the weekend of January 5th. This was a preseason all ACC first team wideout.
Hello.
Didn't have quite that level of a year. Banks has 107 catches for 1,404 yards and 13 touchdowns over his career. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He's gone over 600 yards each of the last 2 seasons. Michigan is involved, as is Purdue, Minnesota, West Virginia. Now, it's unknown if the Wolverines are treating him as a plan A priority, or is he kind of like a plan B guy? I would say for Nebraska, he's a plan A option in the portal.
He's 6'4", 205 pounds, and they say, I mean, good red zone receiver because of his body control and height. I read in your story there was a scout that said one area of concern is he doesn't get a lot of separation. But yeah, once again in Nebraska's room, he would stand out because he's a proven commodity. Sean, I think he had 59 catches this year, which isn't bad. But yeah, you mentioned his numbers again: 6'4", 205 for Jamal Banks. For Dante Dowdell, 6'2", 218. And as you know, it's just my personal opinion, which doesn't mean that much, but I like Rule continuing to bring in bigger players. When I cringe when I see 5'9", 180. I mean, not in the Big Ten. You can do it. There's guys who can do it. I mean, there's exceptions to all these rules, but I don't know.
Like you could find a Wandale Robinson.
Yeah, you can. But when you look at Ohio State and Michigan, do you see 5'9", 180 anywhere?
On the perimeter, probably
not.
No,
you don't.
In the slot and the all-purpose role, yes, but not on the perimeters.
No, you don't even see it in it. You don't really see it at all.
Because the 50, okay, you don't.
Oh, I'm saying
you don't get wide open in the Big Ten very often.
Right.
So what happens? It's a lot of 50-50 balls, a lot of balls where you're going to have to fight to get off the line of scrimmage. You're going to have to fight to get up in the air to get the ball. And size matters in those situations in the red zone.
Yeah. Okay. I know what you can do. You can do it. Listeners can do it. Oh, what about player X? He's 5 foot. Yeah, there's exceptions. Of course, there's exceptions. But generally speaking, and those top tier teams in the Big Ten, how many little running backs and little receivers do you see? I watch them. You don't see them. You don't see them.
Like Kenny Bell was a great receiver, and he wasn't huge, but he'd be big on this Nebraska team.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't that big. He wasn't that big. He's big. He was probably what he goes 6'1", probably 190, 195.
6'1", 6'2", but yeah, he wasn't like fit. He wasn't built like a Nunwa.
Yeah, it wasn't like a Nunwa. Or Julian Fleming. Julian Fleming's a pretty big receiver.
Now, Julian Fleming has not announced, but seems like it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to Penn State.
Yeah. Seems like could he be one of those guys who just shows up?
Yeah, campus? And that's there was some. There was like a Insta story, if you like to do that kind of detective work on social media, where a posting from a state college car dealership or something, something like that, where it kind of showed that he's in state college. So we'll see if that all plays out. Nebraska's players report back on January 14th.
Yep.
Classes begin though on the 22nd. So it's a late. I mean, these kids get like a 6-week break now. From campus.
We got pretty long break back in the day too, though.
Not 6, so it was more like 4.
Was it?
So they've squeezed in a mini session of classes that you can take over the break.
Okay.
And so, because if you remember, we started school the week before Martin Luther King Day.
Okay.
Because you always got that Monday off.
Yeah.
They start school the Monday now after Martin Luther King Day.
You have a remarkable memory. Yeah. So key dates, like you said, January 14th, Nebraska players return to campus, report back. And then January 22nd, school starts. And that's when players officially become transfers, officially become Huskers or wherever. They got to go to class. That would start the official clock.
Yeah, the 14th. Take part in some sort of informal team activity.
Right. So there you go.
A meeting or something.
You mentioned a couple other guys in your story about Jamal Banks, the receiver. You mentioned Donovan McCulley of Indiana.
Yeah, he's at least publicly acknowledged a Nebraska offer.
Okay.
But nothing seems to have materialized. Very few portal guys tweet their offers.
Right.
McCulley was. Now, Brazil, the receiver from Tulane.
Chris Brazil.
Is already committed to Tennessee.
He committed to Tennessee.
And like 40 teams reached out to him, and he did a graphic with On Three's Hayes Fawcett of all like 40 teams.
Did he really?
Yeah, and Nebraska was one of the teams.
Okay.
So, they are in the market, but as you know, with the portal, a lot of it is just so private.
It is.
I mean, they're just kids aren't really into the dog and pony show. They're into the money.
I'll tell you what's not, but your reporting, Sean, is critical. Those two players are critical in my mind. Not that they're program changing players. I'm not saying that. But Dante Dowdell and Jamal Banks would be guys that would come in and be helpful immediately. That's what transfer portal
And
players are supposed
Rule's
to
not
be.
looking to bring in a ton of transfer portal guys.
We can't really, can he?
A, the numbers, but B, he's doing a whole nother model now. It's identify, develop, retain.
Yep.
Where a lot of teams, like look at Texas women's volleyball.
Yeah.
They're taking more portal players. Like,
are they?
They won the national championship, and their recruiting class is essentially portal players. And John Cook is opposite of that.
Yeah.
So, everybody's doing it a little different.
That's right.
But yeah, you're seeing a lot of things. Like, how about this portal trend this week? Nick Scorton from Purdue enter the transfer portal.
That would be they play a 3-4. He was an outside linebacker. Great. I mean, he looked great against Nebraska. Think about if you go back, if people think I'm engaging in hyperbole, go back and watch the game and tell me what you see. He was a bear in that game.
And from what I gathered,
a bear.
He was, from talking to Tom Dienhart and others at Purdue, he was probably the highest paid guy on the roster.
I'm not surprised.
And he's looking for double that or more.
He'll get it.
And he will get it. There are some teams right now that are just blowing up the market of what the value is. Missouri. Look at Missouri, what they're doing. Every key transfer guy is considering Missouri.
Leave it to Missouri.
And Ole Miss, Missouri, A&M to an extent.
Doesn't Oregon engage in that?
Oregon to a level, but
because they got all that Nike money.
They aren't as Missouri right now. What they're doing, everyone's noticing.
It's like Marty Bird money, right?
Some people didn't quite get our insider reference. If you didn't watch the Ozarks, Marty Bird was in Ozarks, Branson, Missouri. So we're making a reference that Marty Bird's drug cartel money is somehow being laundered to Missouri football.
Yeah, Marty Bird was a master money launderer. Master. And he's played by
Jason Bateman.
You're the man, Sean. Jason Bateman. But anyway, that's
Missouri, what they're doing is incredible, as is Ole Miss. Like the amount of guys that they're bringing in from the transfer portal and just everything out there, it's getting everyone's attention.
So weird. Hey, Sean. I mean, it is really weird out there. And bowl season in college football now basically encapsulates the weirdness of college football. I mean, you have teams like USC playing in the bowl game, in the Holiday Bowl. They're missing 24 players from their regular season roster. 24. Can you imagine covering a Nebraska team back in the day that was without 24 players during the bowl game because of opt-outs, injuries, etc.?
And that happened last year to Florida. They had a bunch of guys out. 24.
I mean, and we'll talk about it in the next segment, but Lincoln Riley's still got to he still has to somehow get that team looking representable.
All right. When we come back, we're going to get into the Big Ten bowl game matchups that we're going to watch here over the next week. We'll discuss the ones we've seen as well. You're listening here to the HuskerOnline Show. And we're back here on the HuskerOnline Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, as we're taking you home here on this Christmas week. Before we get into some Big Ten bowl game discussion, Steve Sipple, this segment of the HuskerOnline Show brought to you by
Sean, Larson Motors. If you're looking for a new vehicle, go for a new experience at Larson Motors in Nebraska City. Larson Motors is one of the Midwest only dealerships with all the major brands in one location. Check that out, Sean. Finding your new Chevrolet, GMC, Hummer, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram has never been easier. Start your new experience today at LarsonMotorGroup.com or at Larson Motors in Nebraska City. Larson Motors, real people, real deals.
All right, let's get into the discussion of Big Ten bowl games. And we've kind of teased on it a little bit, but so far the Big Ten gets off to a great start. I thought Northwestern's win over Utah was very impressive. I mean, it was a classic Big Ten game, but that's a great matchup for Northwestern because Utah kind of plays that style. The Wildcats won 14-7, but the Utes starting quarterback only had 55 yards passing. The leading rusher only had 55 yards. So just a complete defense dominating performance. Ben Bryant threw for 222 as they beat the Wildcats. And then you had the Minnesota win, Sip,
Mm-hmm.
where the Gophers are without Kalimanis, their quarterback,
Yeah.
who went to the transfer portal.
Right.
And has he landed anywhere yet?
Nope, I don't think so.
So I don't know if he was cut, but they've got a transfer coming in. But they had to start a guy at quarterback named Cole Kramer. And he was a guy that was done, kind of moving on. He's getting married next month.
Yeah. Cole Kramer.
And they brought Kramer out to manage that game. I mean, he was 8 of 16 for 26 yards passing. 8 of 16.
Well, he had thrown one pass during the regular season, and it was intercepted. He had thrown one pass all season, and it was intercepted.
It was like a Matt Turbin type deal for Minnesota. They just had to start a guy that was kind of a manager, lower profile player. And
see what we've talked about this off air. What happened though? Minnesota just loaded up in the run game, and they have a kid named Darius Taylor who ran for 208 yards.
He looked good.
Real good. Coming off of a leg injury, 35 carries. 35 carries, Sean. He had missed the previous 5 games. Detroit native. Game was in Detroit. Great story. But you said it really well off air. It's not that MAC teams can't beat Big Ten teams. It's really hard to do because what you see up front. Minnesota looked like an NFL team up front compared to Bowling Green.
The size, the measurables, the resources.
That shows up in the trenches.
Well, and then even just the Big Ten teams have coaches on top of coaches on top of coaches. So you're just staffed up. I mean, you have so much staff on a Big Ten team compared to a MAC team.
Yeah, and Bowling Green was good. I mean, that's a good team. They had 27. They had forced Bowling Green 27 turnovers this year, which led the FBS. And they are good on the outside. They're good on the perimeter. They have this receiver Odu Hilaire, something like that. Good. He's good. Caused a lot of problems for Minnesota. And they have skill players, Bowling Green, that can cause problems. But again, trenches, trouble. I mean, Minnesota just imposed its will up front on both sides, Sean, on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, use a military or war reference. I mean, it's just like going against a country and an army that just has superior tanks and weapons and resources, and they're just going to maul you over.
And Minnesota was a 5-7 Big Ten team. I will say this on behalf of PJ Fleck, they look good in that game.
No, I mean, knock Fleck, and we've been critical. Everyone's been a little critical of Fleck over the years because of his style, but he's consistent. I think they've won how many bowl games in a row?
5 straight.
I thought it was 7.
Well, they've won 5 straight under Fleck. They've won. No team in America has won more straight consecutive bowl games than Minnesota. 7. Georgia's next with 6. But Fleck, I give him a ton of credit. As I told you, I watched the game from start to finish. Minnesota was ready to go. Now, Bowling Green scored on the first drive, went 75 yards, looked good, blah, blah, blah. But Minnesota came ready to play without its quarterback, with a guy who had only thrown one pass all year. But Minnesota was ready to roll. I was really impressed with Minnesota. They only won 30-24. Again, Bowling Green's okay, but I mean, they really hit you on Bowling Green really hits you. Their defense really hits you.
All right, we got a lot of other Big Ten matchups.
Go.
I want to squeeze in here. We don't have a lot of time to hit on all of them, but Rutgers, Miami, I'm really intrigued. The game's in Yankee Stadium.
Why are you intrigued?
Just to see how Greg Schiano has that team fired up to play Miami in a cold weather Yankee Stadium. It'll be a home game for Rutgers.
I'm 100% in agreement with you.
I just expect Greg Schiano to look pissed off and his team to come out. And Miami's going to probably not be too thrilled to be there.
I think you're reading it pretty well.
And it will be interesting. I'm just interested to see that fight play out.
Well, oftentimes in bowl games, what it boils down to is who's more motivated. And you got to think Rutgers will be more motivated.
You know what Bob Devaney told the Huskers before the Gotham Bowl when they played Miami in New York City in Yankee Stadium?
I'm ready, Sean. I'm ready for this one.
It was a miserable day. It was cold. It was ugly. And he just said, man, they probably don't want to be here. It's really not. We probably don't want to be out there. But this is like one of those old backyard Detroit alley fights I grew up in as a kid. And you just got to go in the alley and beat the crap out of the guy.
Beautiful.
And they won the game to beat Miami, jump started. But all right, that's Thursday night. Friday night, Missouri, we talked a lot about Missouri and Ohio State. Ohio State without Kyle McCord, still a 3-point favorite.
Yeah. Are they really still 3? Or is it down to, I saw
It says -3 on CBS right now.
Really? They're still a favorite. Now, that's another example of Ohio State. How motivated will they be compared to Missouri? Because Missouri will be motivated. They'll want to topple Ohio State. It's a really interesting game to watch. Now, I don't know if you saw it this morning. This is what? Wednesday morning. Marvin Harrison, they went to the Bulls site. He didn't practice today. Didn't dress out. I don't think Marvin Harrison's going to play.
So he's going to go pro or just not
Well,
play?
I don't know what's happening. I mean, he didn't dress out. And so they're reporting from the Bulls site. The reporters that are there, are reporting that he's probably not going to play. Didn't dress out today. So they wondered. People were sort of assuming Marvin Harrison's going to play until Wednesday when they got to the Bulls site and he didn't practice.
That's why I give Nick Saban a ton of credit. Like last year when they played K-State in the Sugar Bowl, guess who played in that game?
Everybody.
Bryce Young.
Everybody.
The linebacker. I mean, all those top guys played.
Pretty much everybody.
That's culture. If you
It is.
You guys believe in
It's team.
now, Ole Miss, Penn State, that's another intriguing one in the Peach Bowl Saturday at 11 a.m. You know, Lane Kiffin's had a big offseason in the portal and recruiting, and Penn State is a quiet 10-2. I mean, those are two quiet 10-2 teams.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because they both represent the same thing to me. They're good in their conference. They're good in very good conferences, but they're not upper tier. You might say Penn State is. No, this year they looked. There's quite a gap between.
They're both first runner-ups of the beauty pageants.
There you go. Thank you. Good analogy. Yeah, they are.
So our first runner-up.
So what's that look like? Now, here's okay. I'm not going to get off the lawn guy, but the trouble with bowl season now is you just don't know who's playing. You don't know how many opt-outs does Ole Miss have? How many does Penn State have? And what I suggest happens, I think might be impossible, but I wish it could happen. I wish there was some official list that you could go to where you saw all the opt-outs for each team. What I have found in researching these games, it's hard to find who's playing and who's not.
Well, I want to say Vegas Insider and some of these websites will have a list of injuries and reports on teams, but yeah, Auburn, Maryland, Tagovailoa is not playing.
The Maryland quarterback not playing.
I mean, so Auburn is favored by 7. That game is in Nashville. So you would think it'd be a lot of Auburn fans there. It's a short drive from Nashville to.
What's that game mean though without
Tagovailoa?
Yeah. What's that game mean? Okay, I'm going to interject with the Jeff Brom quote. If you're Sean, I don't know if you fit this category of people who are overly negative about the bowl season because of all the opt-outs. Louisville has 12 guys not playing in the Holiday Bowl. 12. USC, who they're playing, has 24. But this is what Brom said. You're going to have opt-outs every year from here on going forward. What you've got to do is use this as a stepping stone for next year. Every year, it's going to be new players that have to step up. It just happens that nowadays it's going to be in the bowl game where guys have to step up and perform. So that's kind of a positive spin on it, which I actually appreciate compared to Lane Kiffin, who told I read on 3 today. He says the system as it stands is terrible. It's terrible because free agency is going on while teams are getting ready to play bowl games and players are having to make decisions. You know, some players decide not to play at all. Some players decide to go in the transfer portal, but I'm going to play. I'm going to play one more game. It's just.
Yeah, Nick Scorton, I mean, that type of situation where collectives get to camps. They can't technically get to the player directly, but they say, hey, we can get you $650,000 if you leave Purdue. Can Purdue get you that?
No, probably not.
And so that kind of stuff's happening. We're up against it here, but we have Wisconsin, LSU.
No Heisman Trophy quarterback, and no Braylon Allen.
So that's in Tampa, yeah. And Iowa, Tennessee on New Year's Day at noon on ABC. I'm interested in that game
because
Tennessee's going to be starting a true freshman.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of an acid test.
It's kind of like last year. Iowa played Kentucky without Will Levis.
Yeah,
and they feasted on them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Iowa defense is a big game.
Iowa going for win number 11.
And Kirk Ferentz will continue to make digs at Dylan. He made digs at Dylan Raiola. You saw that this week?
I think he's digging on his way out. He's making digs on his way out.
Not he made necessarily a dig at Frost.
Yeah, not necessarily going out this year.
He could.
Yeah, he could. It seems like, yeah, he could.
They got to pay him, though. He's not going to give up money. If you have guaranteed money on your deal, you're not leaving that. You're going to, just like Bill Snyder, when he left Kansas State, he got paid out like he got fired. Yeah. So if Kirk Ferentz leaves Iowa, they're going to have to pay him that money.
A lot.
Like, he's not just going to give up that contract, because that's why you get that contract, because it's guaranteed money.
Yeah, and especially under the circumstances, he's not going to.
You don't give up guaranteed money.
No.
All right. Briefly, Alabama, Michigan, New Year's Day. It's a classic Rose Bowl. Saban, Harbaugh. 1.5 point favorite for Michigan. It surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, you give Saban a month to prepare.
I like Michigan in this game. Just knowing the history of, I like Alabama in this game, knowing the history of Michigan in these playoff games. They've struggled.
I'd have to look at the matchup a little more closely. I reiterate, giving Saban a month, giving him a month. And the other thing about this game to watch, and nobody's really talking about it much, this might be Harbaugh's last game at Michigan. It might be Saban's last game at Alabama. There's undercurrent buzz at Alabama that this is it for Saban. Maybe it's not even undercurrent, but I haven't heard much about it in the national media. This might be it for him.
In replacing Saban, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, real interesting.
There was a time where you thought Dabo Sweeney would be their first call, former player.
Yeah, who knows?
But it seems like that's kind of cooled.
Yeah, it's cooled, and it'll be interesting if it happens, because Greg Byrne, the Alabama AD, doesn't use a search firm. So I don't know how he'll go about it exactly. I don't even know if it's happening, but it could.
Would Kiffin leave Ole Miss to go to Alabama?
Maybe. I mean, he would make sense.
But would Nick Saban bless that? I don't think so.
I don't either. I don't know.
And I would think it's like a Tom Osborne type thing. They're going to want Saban to bless the next move.
But there's nobody on the staff right now, I don't think.
No.
At Michigan, Sharon Moore's on the staff. Would Michigan go the Sharon Moore route?
Yeah,
he's never been a head coach, Sean.
That's the typical Michigan way of doing things. I think Michigan will go with Sharon Moore. And
never been a head coach.
Keep the blueprint, just like Frank Solich had never been a high school head coach.
Right. No, you're right.
It's good point. But like Osborne told me this summer, he goes, the reason I did what I did is I wanted to keep it intact. If they wouldn't have let Frank Solich take over, then Bill Byrne would have brought in his own guy to be the head coach and then get rid of all the assistants. Osborne probably wouldn't have stepped down. He would have considered differently. He told me that. He said, he goes, but the fact that I can get Frank in and then keep my staff in place, I thought that was the best thing for Nebraska versus blowing everything up and then having a whole new group of people come in.
Pretty similar situation.
So
it's pretty similar.
Why would they want to blow that up at Alabama?
Blow it up at Bama and blow it up at Michigan. I don't know. I don't know why they would.
I mean, Ohio State didn't blow it up. Urban Meyer.
No, they didn't.
Figured out a way. Well, he figured out a way to make, Ryan Day the guy. So, all right, we're going to, we kind of went long on every segment. So when we come back, we're going to have to figure out our time here, but we have 2 mailbag segments we're going to hit on. You're listening here to the HuskerOnline Show. And welcome back here to the HuskerOnline Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple. Thank you to everybody for joining us here on this holiday week, as we'll be back as well Friday for HuskerOnline headlines. So hold your calls, clear your calendar out. We'll be back on Friday as well.
Yeah, we're working.
So we're going to get after it, but we're going to do 2 mailbag segments today, because a lot of times we don't even come close. Like, there's 52 responses in the mailbag thread on Twitter. 52.
Pick some good ones there,
so
Sean.
I'm going to go through here. This is an interesting question. Will the Huskers ever be as good as Northwestern? Laughing out, like kind of the laughing snarky emoji.
They beat him.
They beat him.
He's laughing though. He's not serious.
But yeah, I mean, give Braun credit.
Oh God,
it's one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen.
It's pretty good. 8 wins. 8 wins. They beat Utah. We all agree Kyle Whittingham, I don't know, Sean. I'm going to say he's a top 5 coach in America.
I mean, they were just taking bombs, haymakers from everybody, and he survived it.
I read in the Chicago Tribune, probably in August, that there was one there was a faction of people just saying, let's not have a football program at Northwestern.
Think about he saved the stadium project there. Probably. I mean, they never. I mean, supposedly it was never on it, but I think it stabilized that project from getting done now.
Yeah, David Braun, who I don't think he'd been a head coach.
No,
it's very informative in that regard. That you don't. I got to admit, I get caught up in that sometimes where I'll look at Sharon Moore's resume. Never been a head coach. He's only 37. Don't do it. Hire a guy who's proven. Hire a guy like Lance Leipold, who's, of course, I mentioned Lance, that has a resume of success as a head coach. But David Braun is another example of a guy that didn't have it. And as you said, did one of the best coaching jobs you'll ever see. Now, Sean, I would ask you this, though. That's only part of the road here. He's got to build a program. Is he capable of building a program? That's what you got to see.
What kind of staff changes? And evidently Pat Fitzgerald was in communication with him throughout the year. I mean, they were supportive of, he was supportive of him.
How many games did Northwestern win last year?
One.
They
beat Nebraska in Ireland.
They won 8. Now it tells you it's odd. Now we'll get to the next question here quick, but Northwestern must not have been in that bad a shape culturally, right? We all kind of assumed, oh my God, they're having these crazy shower scenes, and
we'll see what the payout is to Fitzgerald. That will tell us everything we need to know.
It's in the court of law, I think, right now.
Yeah, are we talking about just a few guys that were able to create enough momentum to get done what they got done, or was it a legit scandal?
That's the question. That's a critical question, because right now, to me, it looks like the latter. It looks like or whatever you said first, I don't know. Just a few guys uprising caused a big furor, because the culture doesn't look bad to me, right?
How about
the defense is really good.
David Braun, though, just bets on himself to go to Northwestern from North Dakota State. He was a coordinator.
Defensive.
For Matt Entz.
Yeah.
Think about this. Matt Entz was trying to get himself a Mountain West type head coach job. Couldn't. He's now leaving North Dakota State to be a linebackers coach at USC. David Braun kind of put a wager on himself to go work for Pat Fitzgerald, who was on thin ice, and now he's got a Big Ten head coach job.
Yeah, did a masterful job.
I mean, just an unbelievable way how life can turn. Mm-hmm. All right, this is kind of a big picture one from Bill. What is your favorite moment covering Nebraska athletics? And that's, I mean,
real tough question.
There's a lot for me.
Real tough.
When you do rankings of things covering it,
a favorite's hard. I mean,
my favorite non-football moment was Nebraska making the College World Series. Growing up in Omaha, it was my first job, and being at Rosenblatt, where I grew up as a kid down the road, just seeing Nebraska there, seeing the Nebraska fans, having President George W. Bush throughout the first pitch.
That was super cool.
And he walked through the press box.
Right.
And I shook his hand.
President
Bush, and he shook your hand like a man, like a grip. And he explained to me how he had a bulletproof vest on. So, it's hard to throw a pitch. And I go, he threw a pretty good pitch, Mr. President.
The office seemed to mean more back then too. But God, it's hard to say favorite. I don't know. Funnest, favorite, most satisfying. I mean, the most satisfying was like, I don't want to get into this too much. Just 30 seconds. 95 NCAA volleyball championship. I was the only one there from the Journal-Star in Springfield, Massachusetts. I had to write a front page story, a notebook, a column, and a gamer. And it was not an early game. It was early enough that I could do it all, but not real early. And I remember thinking, I don't know how I just pulled that off, but I did. And I always felt good about that. So it was Nebraska's first national title. It was the volleyball team, Terry Pettit, and Kate Cernich had a monster match against Texas, and that was Nebraska volleyball's first national title, and I always remember covering.
I mean, being at the Rose Bowl and in that it was kind of like the end of the dynasty, but just being there covering a national, that was my only national championship game I got to cover. And just being there for that. And I mean, even the Sioux game against Texas, that was
incredible.
I mean, that game, that moment helped propel Nebraska's brand to get the Big Ten's attention.
It did.
To join the Big Ten the next year.
It did. Bo did a good job.
I don't know if 09 doesn't happen the way it did, where Nebraska's trajectory looked like it was on the rise, that they get in the Big Ten. And think about that right now.
I know.
Think about that right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Big 12's good, but it's not the Big Ten. It's not the SEC in terms of money.
Especially if we're out of the AAU. Because they were in the AAU when they got that Big Ten invite. And they got booted right after they got in, which no one's ever been booted. They're trying to get back in. But yeah, those are some ones that stick out for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated question in part because I might say that game you're talking about when Texas beat Nebraska, but I did a bad job covering it. So it's not one of my favorite moments. I didn't cover it very well. I didn't cover it was very challenging because of what happened. And I didn't feel like I did a very good job.
The DeJon Gomes fumble strip. And I mean, that was happening like when you're going down the elevator.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
And then you couldn't go on the field.
Right. It was hard. It was, I just didn't do it. I didn't write a very good column is what I'm saying. I walked away from it going, I didn't really write equal to the moment.
I just remember how upset Texas people were.
Yeah.
Like officials too, like media, and because they were just like, how are we losing to Nebraska? Not just lose, they were getting their ass kicked. I mean, I've never seen a player at that position particularly dominate a game the way he did.
No, and I remember that big screen in Jerry's World, which was very clear. I mean, it was just that I watched the game on that big screen because we were kind of in a weird position at the media. And I'll never forget them locking in on Colt McCoy's eyes and seeing the utter fear in his eyes. Every snap, Sue got to him. And you could see it because they would zone in hard on his eyes. Scared.
By the way, Sue,
I know fear when I see it.
And Sue played in the Holiday Bowl. Would that have happened in today's era of college football?
Good question.
But all right, when we come back,
better times, Sean. Better times.
Simpler times. When we come back, we'll continue the mailbag discussion. You're listening to the Husker Online Show. Final segment of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple. Thanks for joining us here on this holiday week. And we got a great special as well for Husker Online viewers here on the YouTube channel. If you want to get on Husker Online, we're going to give you 2 months for $1 by simply using promo code NU1. That's the best deal you're going to get. It's for our YouTube viewers and listeners. Promo code NU1 get you 2 months for $1. Thanks for joining and watching us here on Husker Online. Check out our great work on the website. But let's delve back into this mailbag. And Guy had an interesting take. This is from 6 Minute Spotlight. Was interested why on signing day Nebraska held out for commitments of 3 different defensive backs when they already had so many on the roster. And what I would say is I think they probably already knew these guys were committed for several weeks, if not months.
Really? You think so?
I think they had a pretty good read that Larry Tarver and Amari Sanders and some of these guys were in the bag.
Really? Well, you'd know more than anybody, Sean.
So
okay, now as far as having a lot of defensive backs, Rule addressed that on signing day with that whole spiel. Spiel is a negative word. His whole take on positionless football, which they do, right? They might take a guy right now that is listed as a safety, might move him down eventually and play him at linebacker. Or it could be the opposite too. A linebacker might move back to safety. But positionless football, we saw it a lot on the defensive side this year. We saw guys moving, like Princewell. Princewell was playing on the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden he's a jack, right? Jack linebacker. You see that.
Mekhi Bayer played inside backer and
100,
jack.
100.
Javen Wright was a safety. He's now a linebacker.
Right. They do it.
That's the thing. Like, even putting together our scholarship distribution chart, it's really hard to properly label a guy.
Right.
And on the suggestion of Sugarland, one of our great users on the website,
great user,
he said, just break down your chart now. D-line, linebacker, secondary.
Good idea.
Just have 3 groups. Don't try to even have inside linebacker, right? Because what's going to happen is there's going to be some of that changes, and then you get called out for it.
So what happens with us, Sean, especially the older media?
So look at this.
We get locked into this because we've been locked into it forever. So what do? You'll ask me, where does a certain player fit in position wise? Because that's what we're trained. That's how our brains are trained to do it, right? We got to retrain our brains. We got to.
Yeah, like Braylon Prude, who we watched in Houston get his offer, he's a safety, but he might be an edge linebacker by the time he's done here.
Could be a corner.
Well, he's 6'5", 195. No, not Braylon Prude, not a corner.
Okay.
He's a safety, possibly a linebacker.
If he's playing corner, I'm going to jump you.
They've never said sit corner to him.
Haven't they?
No, it's always been safety.
Positionless, so he could end up a corner.
Rex Guthrie, him, they're more guys that could keep moving up. Gradney is another guy that could.
But again, got to retrain your brain on this. I mean, it's hard because we're so used to like you even want to do it on the D line. You want to say he's an interior guy. He's an end. I don't know. What is he? What is Robinson? You can move him over the center if you have to, right? Ty Robinson. So you got to get out of we got to get out of that. And it really shows up in the summer when we're doing those positional breakdowns and we're all butting heads saying, okay, where should we put Prince Will? Where should we put
matchups? Let's find the matchups.
Yeah. It's challenging.
All right. Dave has a question, and I don't know. I don't really have a good answer to this, but do you think the Raiola family will move to Nebraska and Dayton playing high school football in Lincoln or Omaha next year?
Good question.
Would they stay in Buford?
Buford, Georgia.
Buford has this reputation where none of the players go to Georgia. Like it's really? They have it. So it's not like that's a Georgia Bulldog, Haven AAA team like you would think. And in Dayton, I'll tell you, Dayton's come a long way.
Has he?
I know, I won't say the school, but I know one Omaha program. I talked to somebody at a prominent program, and he said, I know we'd take them if you'd want to come here.
Is that right?
So it'll be interesting if they move here or if they'll stay in Georgia, or do they keep their place in Phoenix? Do we even know that?
I don't even know.
So, yeah, and I would imagine Dylan is going to have a pretty nice accommodation set up in Lincoln with his NIL. So they'll probably have plenty of places to stay, no matter what they want to do. But yeah, that will be
a question for Dominic.
Yeah, and we'll see Dom later on here, so we'll get a better read on some of those things in January. How does Nebraska? This is from Husker Dude. How does Nebraska deal with the excess in scholarship numbers while also addressing issues in the portal? Well, it's dicey because Nebraska still has the ability. Matt Rule, for his first 18 months, has the ability to not ask guys back that he didn't sign, but they can stay at Nebraska, keep their full package of financial aid and money, and be a student, or go in the portal. So there are players on the roster that would still fall into that camp that Matt Rule could potentially not ask back. Or there's walk-ons like the Bullock brothers that went on scholarship. Guys like that, you could put them on NIL. They can go on an NIL deal that would equal their package.
But you can't do that with scholarship players.
Can't do that with scholarship
Initial scholarship players.
Now you can do it with transfer players, though. I think transfer guys can come in as walk-ons. Like Oliver Martin was a walk-on, came in the program. They didn't have a spot for him, if you remember. So there's creativity you can do. Like Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, my understanding was he wasn't a scholarship guy.
But he got money.
So there's different...
commensurate to a scholarship.
And even in recruiting, Xander Ruggiolari, Evan Taylor, and Camden Cook, they did not sign letters of intent. They are going to be on NIL type deals. But you're going to see Nebraska on signing days from here on out. They're just going to list all the players they add to the program. And they're not going to say this guy signed letters of intent, this guy's not. They've and give Matt Rule, give Vince Ginta, give Sean Patton a lot of credit here. They're trying to create a way to get as many good players in Nebraska as possible.
Really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could literally see the conversation in the football offices. Well, how are we going to do this? We have to list some guys as scholarship and some guys as walk-ons.
Just list them all.
Somebody bright said, no, we don't. Just list them. Well,
in the Dakota schools, like South Dakota States and those places, they have partials there. So on signing day, they list every player.
Mm-hmm.
Like there might be a guy on a 20%, 25% scholarship, and they get listed on the same list.
Once again, for years and years and years, on signing day, we would get a sheet that showed you the scholarship players
The walk-ons.
and then the walk-ons. Now, all one because of what?
Yeah, and
Because
it
college
took,
football's changed.
and it took some reporting on our end to even confirm that Ruggiolari, Evan Taylor, and Camden Cook aren't signees. They're walk-on guys coming into the program, but they'll be treated just like scholarship players.
So that helps, I think, answer that question of the gentleman. How do you get around this? You're telling people how you get around it.
All right. Well, Sip, this was fun. We're going to be back Friday.
Yeah, we'll
so
do it
we
again.
got a whole nother show Friday. And appreciate you coming in on the 27th.
Well, Sean, you're paying me to do it, so I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, make sure you like, follow, subscribe to us here at HuskerOnline.com. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan signing off for another edition of the Husker Online Show.